For nearly 3 decades, ProviNET Solutions has been providing solutions you can trust.
Hey everyone, welcome to ProviNET's thought leadership discussion today. We're doing a little bit different format. This is not going to be a webinar that we play back, and it's not part of our Mailbag Monday segment. We're just having a conversation about strategic IT planning. And over the course of our experience at ProviNET, we've just really come to appreciate how important strategic planning is for every organization. It doesn't matter if you've got 1 employee or 1,000 employees or 10,000 employees. It's just really important to consider the investments that you're making in technology, consider how technology is aligning with the rest of the organization and fulfilling the goals and objectives of the organization, and really just figure out how to get everybody marching in the same direction when it comes to technology. So we're going to just spend some time sort of informally talking about it today. My name's Joe Velderman. I'm ProviNET's Director of Consulting Services. Been with ProviNET for just about 13 years, and this is what I get to do. This is what I love. I love working with organizations. I love going in and learning about where they're going, what they're doing, what their challenges are, and trying to figure out a strategy of how to get them from point A to point B and cause them to be successful with technology.
Yep, and I'm Steve Vandervelde. I'm the Senior Living Enterprise Architect here. I've been with the organization for about 9 years now, and also working a lot with Joe doing the same thing, just working with senior living providers to kind of figure out how they can best use technology, how to propel the lives of the patients they're taking care of, and just enhance the user experience and actually let technology work for them.
Yep.
So like Joe said, really excited to talk about IT strategic planning in the healthcare arena today, and we're excited to get into the what, the when, how, and why of just what actually goes into that project. So I guess, what is IT strategic planning to start with?
Yeah, what is strategic IT planning? Good question. It's a lot of things. There's not like a set formula for doing strategic IT planning. It's just, I think at the end of the day, it's most important to just take a break from being in the trenches, stepping back for a period of time, a few hours, a few days, whatever, and thinking about everything that's going on, getting an inventory of everything that's going on, assessing how well everything is working, and then figuring out what does it look like for us to move forward with technology for the next 6 months or the next year or the next 2 years or the next 3 years or whatever. And so I don't think it's particularly complicated. What is strategic planning? And you could probably go out on Google and find a good answer for what is strategic planning. But from an IT perspective, I think it's really hitting pause, getting yourself out of the trenches, and deciphering where you're at today and where you're going to go forward going forward. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just like you said, it's really important for organizations to just kind of actually stop their day a bit and actually look at what have I been doing over the past year, and what have I been doing that I think has been going well, where's room for improvement, maybe what are our competitors doing, and actually having that conversation not just with IT, but with the whole leadership team, the board, even some of those end users in there too, to kind of just figure out what's our current state, and compared to that, where do we hope to go in the next few years to actually be thriving in this industry. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think education is so important for anybody working in technology. It doesn't matter if you're a senior vice president or chief information officer, or if you're a help desk person. It's so important to stay current with the pace of technology and how quickly technology changes, because and I'm guilty of this myself, right? We can all fall susceptible to just using the same technology over and over again and trying to make it as good as we can without realizing that there may be something better, or it may have evolved, or something may have changed that's going to make our lives a lot easier, or provide much more benefit. And so, part of the strategic planning process, I think, too, is to really figure out what's current with technology, and is our organization current or not? And you can look at that from a whole host of different perspectives. You could look at it from a software perspective, or hardware perspective, or a governance perspective, or a security perspective. There's all kinds of different ways of kind of evaluating, whether or not you're current. But without intentionally taking that step to say we're going to stop just operating and we're going to evaluate what we have and we're going to evaluate what's available, it's really hard to say whether or not you're current or not.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And even with a lot of providers being in that point, I think, where they're almost playing catch up now just to get to what is current. I think so much more of strategic planning too is actually looking at what's emerging, what's going to be the future, because technology seems to be changing so much in our industry now, and with the landscape changing even, we have to change along with it. So, we see a lot of organizations who are really, taking the strategic planning by the horns and actually propelling their organization in the future. They're getting into the emerging technologies, seeing what other things could actually separate them from the competition at that point too. So
innovation becomes a differentiator, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Let me go down a little bit of a rabbit hole on this what question here. And since you're our strategic planning enterprise architect, maybe comment on where you see senior living by comparison to other industries. If we take finance, for example, or manufacturing, or education, or you name it. Is senior living, on the cutting edge? Are they keeping up with the other industries? Are they behind other industries? And if so, how good or bad is the situation?
Yeah. No, I think it's probably a lot of people would say that we are behind. If you look at other institutes like banks or at other providers that are actually in the hospital network, or even dealing with consumer things like Amazon or something like that, we're famously behind. However, I see that changing now. Like in the past 5 years, it seems people are a lot more cognizant of the fact that we're behind, and they're actually getting out and doing stuff like this. I think 5 years ago, hearing of a senior living provider going through an IT strategic plan, it's pretty rare. But now it's like it's something that I think a lot of people are accepting as something you just have to do to keep up at this point. Otherwise, you're famously missing out on things. So, yeah, the solutions are there. I think the technology's there. There's some things that are still kind of in their infancy stages, but there's a lot out there that people just aren't taking advantage of, and just actually getting at the data that they've been capturing over these years. Actually seeing what that means and let that drive your business. That's something that the banking institutes, I think, have been doing for decades now. And we're just starting to get to the point where we're saying, what we really should be looking at our data. Is our data clean? And how do we actually get at it and actually make decisions based off what that data is actually telling us? So.
Good. So I think we've probably adequately addressed the what. Maybe the next logical question for us to answer is the why. Why would an organization choose to press pause and divert attention, divert resources to strategic IT planning specifically?
I guess the why is going to be what's going to drive us the most to make any decisions. So that's definitely a good one to get into next. And I think really it's just actually keeping up with change. I think that's probably the one word that resonates the most with me with IT strategic planning is change. It's going to happen. It is happening. It has happened. What are we doing to keep up with it, and actually assessing our organization and where we're at right now and where we want to be. That's why we do a strategic plan, is basically saying, here's where we are. We want to reach this far, but right now it's outside of our reach. What do we need to do to actually put that inside our reach? If that's emerging to, meet new competition, or if it's just catching up with the industry at that point, or even just saying, here's what we would like to do better because we think we do this pretty well already, and we want to do this better. Things like that seems to be, why we go through these organizations. Would you agree, or have anything else to add?
I think you're spot on, Steve, and I think, the why is just becoming really intentional about it, right? I think whenever we get an opportunity to work with organizations on a strategic planning and assessment or an engagement, it's pretty evident to us and to me specifically when we're working with an IT organization within a broader organization. There's so many times where we find that the IT services group just isn't aligned with the rest of the organization, right? So you learn that you've got maybe an IT director who's resolute on keeping things in-house, and he's got great plans for building out an awesome hypervisor environment with a great wireless network, and he's gonna get everything really robust internally. But the organization in another room, and maybe in the boardroom, is saying, oh, we're going to expand. We're going to start building out a home community-based services division, or we're going to build another community on the other side of the state, or we're going to build another community in another region of the country. And you start to go, well, why are we putting so much resources and so much investment into an internal infrastructure that's not going to serve anything outside of the walls really well?
Not scalable.
Right? Yeah. So for me, it's aligning technology, it's aligning the IT services organization with the overarching goals and objectives of the organization, right? And oftentimes it's just as simple as having a conversation to say, where's the organization going? What is our plan as an organization for the next 3 to 5 years? And how can IT support that?
Yeah.
Right? And the example that I use is probably pretty rudimentary, but it's a classic, I think, example of the ways that IT can better support the organization if they're just aware of where the organization is going.
Yeah, that's what I particularly like to see when we're doing these engagements, is actually seeing the walls come down between senior leadership and IT and all the different departments, just being able to actually get them in the room together and talk about what's the future going to look like for us.
Right.
It's almost like there's just so much transparency that just was never there before.
Right.
You're actually able to hear what's challenging in IT, what's challenging in census right now, and maybe I have a good solution that we can work on together on that. Just being able to see, it's almost like a couples therapy session sometimes. It's like if IT and leadership aren't getting along, we almost get in there sometimes. It's not every organization that's happening, but you're able to get them to kind of see eye to eye, and here's the challenges on each side of it, and here's how we need to align to actually get past those challenges and get into the future of what organization is going to have to offer.
You're totally right. I can't tell you, we kind of joke about couples therapy session, but I can't tell you how many times I've legitimately had an hour-long conversation with somebody about technology, and we finish our conversation, they stand up from the table and they shake my hand and they go, I feel a lot better. Like just being able to express what they're feeling and express where they're going and where they're coming from seems to be therapeutic for people in many
just
ways.
a medium to communicate through almost, and a lot of times it's hard to get that many people at that level involved, but when you do, it's like always good things seem to happen at that point. So one other thing I'll add on the why, we talked about kind of the relationship between the IT service organization within an organization and the senior leadership team or the board. And if we kind of look at the converse of that, you've got the IT service organization, you've oftentimes got some sort of leadership there, but then you've got a whole bunch of people oftentimes that are serving that department, right? So you've got maybe help desk people or administrators or software specialists or subject matter experts or whatever that are serving the organization in some IT capacity. And without some sort of a plan, without some direction, that group can often kind of find their own little directions to go in, right? And before you know it, you've got 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 people kind of heading in their own little direction. And we've seen that too many times too, where you've got a team of people who are really talented and really devoted to the organization, but they don't know what the destination is. And without that destination, they're going to try to do the best that they can to do a good job and serve the organization really well. But nobody's going to end up in the same place. And it's going to cause frustration because nobody knows where they're supposed to be going. So having a plan, having some strategy that they can work off of, provides them not only clear guidance for
where they're going, but how to get there too.
Yeah, it's almost like a reboot and realignment for the organization, and yeah, it can't be just that faceless, nameless organization level. It has to really affect each person,
right?
You know, that each individual that's part of that team,
right?
They're all in the same course and moving forward with the same plan. Yeah, that's what we hope and strive for. So, you feel like we addressed the why pretty well?
I think we talked about the why pretty sufficiently.
Okay.
So we covered the what, we covered the why. What's next?
How about how?
The
how
how.
do we best go about IT strategic
The
planning?
how. Yeah, we could probably spend quite a bit of time talking about the how.
Yeah.
And here again, I don't know if there's necessarily a right way and a wrong way of going about this.
Yeah.
But the way that we do it at ProviNET is we start with I call it the you are here discussion, right? So I use the example of like, when I used to go Christmas shopping before Amazon, I would go to the mall.
Yeah.
And I would park somewhere a half a mile away and walk to the mall, and then get to the mall, and I'd have a list of everything that I wanted to get for my friends and family members or whatever. But I had no idea where to go in the mall, right? I don't go to the mall that often. So the first thing I would look for is the big kiosk by the entrance of the mall with a map of the mall and a little red dot that says "You are here." And I think in many regards that's a good euphemism of how organizations should start to think about technology and strategic planning. So you have to first figure out, where are we? What's the current state of technology? And there's a lot of pieces to that. You have to figure out from an inventory perspective, what pieces of hardware do we have? What pieces of software do we have? What policies and procedures do we have in place? What's our governance structure look like?
Yeah.
What do we have from a cybersecurity perspective? So performing that comprehensive inventory can oftentimes be a pretty big step for organizations if they're not regularly keeping up with that.
Yeah,
Some organizations that we've worked with do a fantastic job of inventorying things, and they've got a master sheet that they can pass out.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably step number one when it comes to the how.
Yeah, figuring out your current state pretty much.
Yeah.
And then I guess what would be a good next step, pretty much figuring out if you are here, maybe you're trying to get to Kohl's or something over here in that mall.
Yeah,
Maybe
so after step one, after you've got that comprehensive inventory of everything related to technology, then I like to figure out what's the temperature of that inventory. And what I mean by that is, how satisfied are we with the current state of technology? And from a technical standpoint, it's pretty easy to run through an inventory list of workstations and endpoints and servers and switches and routers and firewalls and wireless access points and say, yeah, this probably needs to be replaced, or this is probably good for another year, or this is brand new, we don't have to do anything with it. That's pretty straightforward. Where you start getting into more of the temperature discussion, or the heavy lifting, I suppose, is figuring out from a user perspective, how well is the technology working for them?
Yeah.
And most often the infrastructure is not the challenge. Sometimes it is, but most often you're going to get more conversation from the end users in talking about information systems and the software applications.
Yep, I definitely agree with that. Once you start talking about how happy they are or are not with their AHR or any other enterprise applications, like what are you using for point of sale or marketing or anything like that, that's where we start hearing, I think, a lot of deviation across, what's out there, and are you still using spreadsheets, or are you still using paper, or are you actually, using a software, but are you happy with it, and is it best of breed? And that kind of seems to be where a lot of that actually gets to the heart, is, what's best of breed these days, and even beyond that, what is out there for something like point of sale or marketing. A lot of organizations may not have that information readily available without jumping on Google, but actually hearing, I think, from other providers, what are you using and how happy are you with it, and how widely accepted is that product. That's where I think we get a lot of benefit from working with people, is we have that scope. We're actually able to talk at that level.
So you know, I find when you go into a conversation and you're trying to assess the temperature of a department and their use of an enterprise software application, it's best to go into that conversation with some intentionality, right? You don't want to just cast a wide net and say, "Oh, tell me about how well you like your EHR software," because you're going to probably not get the types of quality answers that you're looking for with that.
Yeah.
So I typically try to go into those conversations with very specific questions, and I'll, you know, sit down with nurses or something like that and say, "Tell me about your workflow for collecting information for the MDS. You know, how does the IDT team work together, and how does the software help you with that?"
Yeah.
Right. So if you can kind of shape the questions, you're going to get much better answers, much more qualitative answers than you would by just casting a wide net. And that's something, honestly, that experience has taught me, like doing this dozens and dozens of times for different organizations. You learn that you kind of pose questions that are going to get you better answers and more qualitative answers.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. You don't want to just go in and say, "How do you like your EHR?" Because chances are you're going to hear just what they want it to do better, or they want that one down the street or something like that. So actually, you know, getting at the heart of the matter and talking about what's the workflow look like, what challenges do you have in getting data out or something like that. I think then you're going to get a much better picture of, you know, what the current state is and where there's maybe room for improvement. So yeah. And I guess next up would probably be to actually take all the information that you're gathering from, you know, the IT team, the board level, the leadership that's there in the departments, and actually starting to aggregate that data and actually identify which items do you actually want to hit, and probably figure out a timeline around each of those items too, and maybe even go as far as to assess, you know, what resource commitment you're going to have to implement these, what difficult level they may be, and if they're going to affect anything like your existing infrastructure, you need to make updates or anything like that. And actually trying to start put some initial project plans around those initiatives.
Exactly. Yeah, so step one was really finding out where you're at. Figuring out, you know, what is the current state of technology. Step two is assessing the temperature. How well do we like the current state of technology? Step three is trying to figure out, well, okay, now that we know what we want to start to tackle, or what we should tackle, what sort of priority do we put around that? And what sort of impact does that have on the organization from a resource perspective, from a timing perspective, from a cost perspective, right? That's always part of the consideration too. And that can be a tough step. I mean, to synthesize all that information that you collect about the inventory and the conversations that you've had with users, with board members, with executive team members. It's a lot to synthesize all that information and try to come up with a list of 20 or 30 or 100 things, and then start to think about what priority do you want to put on those things. And then I think the final step in the how process for us is to really sit down and start to refine some of those projects, right? So if you identify something in steps 1 through 3 that you know you want to tackle in the next, say, 3 years, the next step is to really, you know, to make it meaningful for the organization, is to really kind of refine that objective, that project, if you will, and figure out, you know, what does that actually mean? When are we going to start this? What does the timing look like? How long is it going to take? What sort of resources are we going to need? Are we going to need people for that? Are we going to need dollars for that? Are we going to need time for that? And documenting those, right? That becomes your plan. That becomes your strategic IT plan. So putting those things into some sort of format that's you know, indicative of an actual plan that people can start to work off of. That's kind of the final step in that how process.
Nice.
Yeah. So we talked about the what. We talked about the why. We talked about the how. Last question. When? Or maybe a better question, how often should organizations go through strategic IT planning? Yeah,
absolutely. And I guess that one, it really depends on your organization and where you're currently at. You know, you can do the strategic planning, you know, at a set regular basis, but I've also heard of organizations doing it as new topics rise up. So if we're opening a new care setting or something like that, it's probably a good idea to hit pause again and go through a strategic plan for actually implementing that care setting. But in terms of like a holistic approach, we're actually looking at the entire organization, assessing the current technology and figuring out what the desired future state's going to be and how we're going to get there. We usually like to see that happen, every 2 to 3 years seems to be a good benchmark to go for. I've heard of organizations doing it once a year, which is great, but I think it's probably a lot more achievable to go for like a 2 to 3 year mark. Anything beyond that, I think you're probably at risk for playing a catch-up game. If you're out at 10 years or something like that, I think that's where you drastically need one at that point.
I would add, I mean, that's great. I mean, you're spot on with exactly how we coach customers through that process. But I would add that, unfortunately, technology, or maybe fortunately, technology changes so fast that to do strategic IT planning for technology that's constantly changing beyond, let's say, 3 years becomes kind of ineffective, right? So by the time you get to year 4 of your strategic plan, you're reading through it and you're like, oh, I don't want to implement Windows Server 2016 because Windows Server 2019 is out now, right? So I think 3 years is the right time. 2 to 3 years is the right amount of time to go between doing a pretty intentional, drawn-out effort of strategic IT planning.
Agreed.
I would also advise organizations to go through a lightweight planning exercise annually, right? And we do this at ProviNET. We go through a planning effort for our own organization every single year, and it's usually right around the time that we're starting to put together budgets. But we sit down and we talk about things that we want to accomplish in the next year, and we go through a lightweight assessment of where we're at, and figuring out what equipment needs to be rotated. It's really just kind of making sure that we're on course to hit our destination, but it's also a good opportunity for us to kind of make sure that we're putting the right things in the budget for the year going forward based on how things may have changed in the year prior. So usually for us that's about a half a day, maybe sometimes it's a full day discussion, and we try to make it fun. We order lunch and we sit around a conference table and we talk through where we're going to go in the next year, but it's kind of our annual planning session to go forward for the next year, and it usually coincides with budget season for us. So
Absolutely.
Well, this has been fun.
Absolutely. It's been great.
I enjoy this part of my role at ProviNET so much, and I'm passionate about it. I love talking about it. I've really enjoyed working with you on this. I'm grateful for the talents and resources that you bring to our organization, but also to our customers. So
same here. We definitely enjoy working together in this regard. Absolutely. I think this is where the fun part of our job gets in, where we actually get to go out and meet providers and hear about their challenges and actually provide some assistance. I think that's what helps get us out of bed each day. So,
Well, if you are interested in learning anything more about strategic IT planning, feel free to reach out to Stephen or to myself. We'd love to talk to you about it. And if you're interested at all in engaging with ProviNET on a strategic IT planning endeavor, we would love to work with you on that. We think that that's something that we're really skilled at and kind of uniquely qualified at, specifically for the senior living and long-term care industry. So feel free to reach out to Stephen or I if you have any questions. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.